Welcome, everybody. This is Two Guys Tech Chats. I'm with Branden and I'm Rich, and we do this mostly every month. We took a little bit of a break because of the summer holidays here in the U.S. And Branden, how you been, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad. It's finally summer around here, so not a huge fan. Yeah. I like going outside, but a little too warm for me.
Yeah, I'm not enjoying this heat either. But Oregon summers really aren't too bad as long as the forests are not on fire.
Yeah, we'll see.
So this chat is going to be about backup and disaster recovery, which is probably something that a lot of people don't necessarily think about a lot. We're going to go into a relatively high amount of detail. Branden's very well prepared. Rich, just coming off vacation, is not very well prepared, but we'll get through this. So I guess we should probably start at backup.
Yeah, and to preface this whole thing, this is a very complex and nuanced topic for your organization and your home lab, and there's no way that today in our 30-minute to an hour and a half podcast that we're going to be able to cover the complexities or even go into full depth on things.
Sure.
Your strategy may be different at home in your home lab. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then your company strategy, I hope, is a little more
organized than a couple of dudes on YouTube.
A couple of dudes on YouTube. But we'll see how that ends up being. But just keep that in mind that there are usually professionals and entire teams that run DR for certain organizations, especially once you get into the likes of Dell and Microsoft and those titans out there.
Big guys. Right, yeah.
And, lots of things you can watch where certain things were forgot about. Like one of the big things when we get to DR, we'll be talking about physical infrastructure and your power and your cooling needs,
right.
And how you need to account for those even in a DR scenario.
Right.
But let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the most things that you at home can do. Let's talk about backups.
Yes.
What do you use?
We have personally, or do you mean channel wise?
Let's talk personal,
okay.
And then we'll talk channel wise over.
All right.
In a bit.
So I'm really simple, and that is I fell in love with a long time ago that Synology enterprise backup software. Active backup that comes with Synology. Just if you own a Synology, you've got this software.
Catch on that one. You have to have an x86 Synology.
True.
If you have an ARM one, it doesn't work. So think of like your DSJs.
Yeah, you need a plus.
They don't have them, but you do need a plus. Yeah.
It's plus models have it. And by the way, if you're running a non-x86 version of Synology, you might want to consider upgrading because there's a lot of things that you get out of the benefits of the more beefier.
Yeah, you get 4 drives too on most of them. Yeah. If I remember, the ARM ones usually only do mirrors or singles.
Yeah,
so
they're a lot cheaper, and they're by intention, right? So I'm using enterprise backup from Synology, and I use it for literally everything in the personal level. So all of my Windows PCs in the house, all of my virtual machines, and everything is all being backed up nightly, and it's just storing it onto the Synology. We have a DS 3622 Plus, XS Plus downstairs. We had the video about it a long time ago. But anyway, that software, and I'm going to gush a little bit, which is something that I probably shouldn't necessarily do because listen, I'm not sponsored in any way. I'm not sponsored by Synology. I'm not a huge I'm not shill for Synology. I'm a big fan of TrueNAS as well as Synology. We run TrueNAS for the YouTube stuff, so I just make sure I'm clear. But that backup software from Synology is just stupid easy, simple, and it essentially now they even back up Macs, even though you've got Time Machine that's part of Mac, right?
Yeah.
But now they actually have a client that'll do. And they'll do bare metal restores. By the way, a bare metal restore is when you can restore a computer from a complete physical hardware failure. Like the hard drive dies, it's not restoring a file that you delete. It's like building a computer from the bottom up again.
Wow.
And just a little bit more. I don't want to, again, not super gush, but it natively integrates and backs up all of my VMware stuff. Mm-hmm. So all of the virtual machines are backed up, they're maintained. It does CBT, which is change block tracking.
Yeah.
So it's free.
Yeah.
A capital F, free as in beer. Now, you had to buy a Synology, which is a high price tag, especially like Branden said for the x86 models, but it's free.
Yeah, I mean, I used to use Archware in my home lab a lot.
I did too, a long time ago before this, yeah.
Yeah, and it would pull all the VM disk in and it would store them to a separate one. I was actually running a DSJ with just an NFS mount setup. So it was actually going to a separate computer, but because it wasn't an x86, I couldn't get all the full fat one. And then I finally picked up the DS920 Plus, I think it was one. It's a four drive system. And I used Active Backup, and it blew me away. I actually learned that you can hook it up directly to host. You don't have to have.
You don't have no, as long as you have a license that'll support it. Right?
Yeah, we'll talk a bit about like Commvault and Veeam and some of the larger ones, which require you to have a vCenter because they want you to talk to the API. Yeah. But this one, you could just wire it up to a host. And I was like, that's
amazing.
That's, game changing for me. The other thing, have you used the file server side of it yet?
Where you can pull files out?
So you can hook it up with rsync and use some of the rsync modules. And
I have not done. I've seen it, but I haven't.
So that's what I use right now. So if you're running the newest form of TrueNAS Scale, you'll notice that they've pulled out the rsync modules in their latest update in 22.13.1, I want to say.
Okay.
This was because rsync modules are not super secure, not great, but you can still rsync over SSH, no worries.
Okay.
And the nice part is I hooked it up to the Synology, put some SSH keys in there because you're definitely using SSH keys on all your servers, right? People wouldn't not do that.
Yes, you are. You better be.
And then I allow it to pull all the data sets in, and it will keep incremental tracking. So if I lose a file a couple of days ago, I just go find and restore that same file. And I've been blown away by how good that one is as well.
Yeah, the one thing I want to just add, because you mentioned it, like, you can expect that when you're backing up a workstation or a computer or desktop, whatever, when you're just using something that's a PC, it makes sense that you'd be able to go in and then just grab a file you want, right? You can go into the VMDKs that are backed up in vCenter or just from ESXi on that backup software and restore individual files as well, which is, we're talking like Veeam. This is Veeam. This is Veeam level stuff, right? Veeam, by the way, I think both Branden and I have a lot of background experience in Veeam because the companies we worked at and worked currently with used Veeam. And it's kind of the de jour backup for virtualization products and infrastructure, but not so much for physical. I know they do backup of physical stuff, but the features that this has is they're enterprise level.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's just out of the box. Like, you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Thousands of dollars a month.
The only thing that I think is really missing from Synology to be a full enterprise level is to do T-log backups for SQLs. But that's an extra, that's application aware. That's, not stuff that I think right now Synology wants to focus on. And that, I guess, leads us into Veeam, which Veeam is your what is it? Is it the 80-pound gorilla yet, or is it still like the new kid on the block?
No, I think it's fair to call Veeam the 800-pound gorilla in the backup industry, or software industry.
Yeah,
you have the likes of Commvault, and you've got other big guys in the market.
Rubrik,
Yeah, but Rubrik is all appliance based. So to use Rubrik, you have to buy hardware too, which Commvault doesn't or Veeam doesn't. You can just buy the software, and that's the big differentiator on that. There's lots, guys. There's just. You throw a stone. There's open source backup too, like Backup D we were talking about earlier before the show. There's other backup solutions out there, but Veeam is the de jour enterprise backup, unless you are using like Rubrik. Rubrik and Veeam are basically the two we throw back and forth. But yeah, so.
And you get to pay pretty pennies for both. Veeam does have a community license though, and I highly suggest you check it out if you want to get a feeling of how Veeam works.
Except it has to run on Windows.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Except you will need a Windows server, which makes me a little bit sad. I'm
surprised that they haven't produced a Linux appliance.
Or like an OVA, you could just load into VMware.
Yeah, just get appliance.
Or Linux. I don't know. It's not their bread and butter.
Okay. So what Brand's talking about is Veeam uses Linux for a lot of things. You can use it for your proxies and but your actual Veeam software, the stuff you interact with when you're setting up your schedules and you're doing backups and restores and whatnot, has to run on Windows, which is ridiculous, honestly. But that's the way they do it. That's the way it always has been. So
they want you to move to. They also have various cloud offerings, so it surprises me if they want you to move into their cloud.
Everyone wants to go to the cloud. That's just.
But speaking of clouds, do you have 3-2-1 backups?
Well, first, what is a 3-2-1 backup?
So 3-2-1 backups, if you're not aware, is a backup methodology that you should have 3 copies of your data, preferably on 2 different types of media, and then 1 is offsite. And if you're really, really bougie, you can put it in the cloud.
3-2-1-1.
Yeah, kind of 1-1. Like, I don't know if you really want to do that, but since we're talking now more enterprise stuff. What does the channel have? How does the channel back up?
We do things differently. So when it comes to the data that the Two Guys Tech has, all of our storage infrastructure that the channel is utilizing is all TrueNAS scale specifically, because that's important to note, I think. And we replicate via a tunnel to you. Mm-hmm. We, as in my garage downstairs, with all the video and all we store everything. Like we delete the raw stuff for the video because it just becomes untenable. But there's all like the contracts we work out with businesses and like all the stuff like Branden right now. You can't see on the screen. He's got we're running Nextcloud, and he's got a text document open, and that's where he's keeping all of his stuff. That's all backed up and restored. So that is all using rsync, though? No, it's not.
No, that's ZFS replication. It's actually built into TrueNAS, and it's a block style replication that's going to bring it over. It's wildly quick too. If you have the bandwidth and the firewall to handle it, which is key. You can get 300, 400 megs going across easy, and if you've got better hardware, expect better stuff because it's super fast on local too.
Yeah, and the whole benefit to that is also it's doing changes.
Yeah,
after your full syncs, like all backups do, it's
initial 20 terabytes, which I know as YouTube is low for most. Sure. Like there are two types of YouTubers. There are the ones that get rid of everything once they're done with it, and there are the ones that keep everything forever. And we're probably somewhere in between.
We are. I've been on this gradual like sliding scale of like I couldn't. Maybe it's the hoarder in me because I mean downstairs and behind us over here you can't see. I just keep everything. Like I don't know. Someday I'm going to need this USB 2 cable. You never know. But that's something that I've had to really like work on getting rid of because at a certain point you have to be realistic about your storage targets and what you can store and whether you actually really need that piece of footage from 6 years ago that's in 1080p and it was shot on a camcorder and this looks like trash, right? So but yeah, so right now what we do is essentially replicate copies over to Branden. At John's house where he's editing, he's got a TrueNAS that is replicating, but he's only replicating like the active projects so he can work and do his editing there and then get ships back and forth. But Branden is our DR site.
Yeah.
So that's a great segue. But disaster recovery, right? That's what that's what we use our relationship for as far as like storing data between our sites. And let's dig into that. So you want to lead with the
so let's talk real dictionary definition here. So a DR is an organization's method to regain access or functionality of its IT infrastructure in the event of a natural disaster, cyber attack, or business disruption.
That sounds like a textbook definition.
Yeah, it's like straight up textbook. This is not to be confused, which if you go through a DR project in your life as an IT admin, you will have people get this confused. I've gotten this confused with business continuity, which business continuity is the level of readiness to maintain critical functions after an emergency or disruption. DR is part of your business continuity plan, but should not be the same thing. And your backups are not your disaster recovery either.
Right. And that's important to make sure your management knows that backups are for things that are deleted on accident or a physical failure on site that is just one thing. If you're pulling the switch on DR, it means that all hell has broken loose. You have unleashed the hounds and it's time to really buckle down because you have a real problem, right?
Yeah, because if you're restoring from backup, even your best backup appliances is going to be hours. If you're pulling,
for sure.
Hundreds of VMs, thousands of VMs, possibly all to bring back into your disaster recovery, you're probably not doing it right.
Yeah.
But so I went and grabbed, since we're both big fans of VMware here, I went and grabbed their definition of it. They have a top 5 steps.
Oh, top five from VMware.
So we'll start with a big one. And I want to like star and bold this. You have a disaster recovery team. A bunch of people who their job is to create, implement, and maintain the disaster recovery plan and said assets.
I don't think that whoever wrote that is such a like a pie in the sky thing. Like no organization that I've ever worked at
has had just a full...
you're the infrastructure administrator. Yeah, you're also the DR admin. Right. Oh, and maybe even the backup guy. I'm sorry, it's just that we only have so many bodies.
At best, I've seen places that have 1 or 2 dedicated like site reliability engineers is what comes to mind.
Sure.
But even then, 1 or 2 people. That's a very small team in charge of very large organizations.
Small team, and they need a huge amount of budget.
Yes,
but they don't get it.
That's the other fun part of this conversation is you may go come up with these great DR plans, and then you get told your budget is about $3, and you will just try your best.
Put it in the cloud.
Yeah.
How about just cold storage?
That's fair, right? The next part. So we talked about team. We're talking about you need to evaluate your risk.
Yeah.
Are you sitting on old hardware? Do you happen to live in a floodplain?
Are you earthquake?
Are you near a giant volcano that has an entire populace near it?
Is there a fault that runs through your entire state?
Things on those lines, so that not only your physical things, but also like your data things. Like, oh, I'm on this old version of software. You maybe are using Move It software and are exposing FTP on the web, things like that. And then the next one, number 3, is to know all your assets, to actually have them identified, categorized, and documented somewhere. Which,
that
like,
is...
Oh man, the amount of things that where I've worked that just aren't that.
It really that's funny that's listed there, because it, like you mentioned, it is something that many of you watching this probably or listening don't probably know this, but it's kind of like a dirty secret in every business. Every single business has an IT team, if they're big enough, and there are computers and infrastructure everywhere, and they do not know every single piece of it. They just don't.
Yeah.
I work for a company of like 1,400 people right now. The last company I worked for was a subsidiary of like 13,000, and all those locations, nobody knows everything. There'll be one dude in an area that knows all of his stuff, and he hasn't talked to the dude over here that knows in that area that knows all their stuff. And it's amazing how hard it is to really know what your level of risk is when it comes to the proliferation of hardware.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
And like, people will try their best. We're not like saying like these are lazy people or anything.
This is not.
Like, you try their best, and
we're not damning anybody.
Yeah, it was a manual solution and it got out of date. Or, things changed and didn't update, or staff changed hands. That's actually one of the big things they call out now, is that, like, you can have power outages, you can have equipment failures, you can have natural disasters, but like, if your IT team quits or gets reorganized or outsourced or whatever, you're going to lose a lot of internal, dare I say, tribal knowledge, which is like the dirty word in IT.
Yeah, the brain trust is going to be gone, right?
And the brain trust is going to be gone. And the brain trust probably wrote down lots of things, but the brain trust doesn't have
it was all like I said, tribal knowledge is like this term that we use like all the time, is jokingly, but it's the truth. Like, the longer you have IT professionals in your organization, the more of a value they are to the company, but also equally the more of a risk, because when they leave or they retire or they get fired, or, the economy changes and they can make another $20,000, $30,000 somewhere else and they bounce, that knowledge is gone. And that's something that companies never know about until it's too late.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is this thing that's not backed up that died? And all of a sudden a big portion of production is offline, right? That's crazy.
That's my favorite part, is finding servers I don't know exist. And I'm like, oh, that's neat.
Yeah, we used to call that, and we still call that, shadow IT.
And then, that's
it's there are people who are not IT people.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode about shadow IT.
That might be a good idea. But shadow IT is essentially a generic term that means people who are doing IT style tasks for a company. They might be responsible for a computer that's under their desk, or something that's in a closet somewhere that was placed there for some engineering.
An application they run.
That's
a big one.
Yeah, that's another big one. Like big, and you never know about those people until it's too late.
Yeah.
And the company's like, why can't I do this thing? Well, that thing you relied on is no longer working because that guy's gone. But, yeah. So back to this.
And then the next one is what we just talked about, backups, but specifically determining also what needs to be backed up. Who should perform the backups, and how backups are going to be implemented, and to have that all written down.
Yeah.
The big two things when we talk about backups, especially in a DR, is talking about RPO and RTO. And RPO is the recovery point objective. That's how frequently you're getting backed up. So if I'm backing up every night, that is 24 hours of latency, I guess, in my backup.
Yeah, time between
each backup. Yeah. And the recovery time objective is how fast can you get all that back up and running? Right. So to put an example here at Two Guys Tech, we have a recovery point objective of about 24 hours, give or take, when a failure were to happen with our stuff. But our RTO is whenever Rich and I have time.
If something happens, like we're backing up every night. So that's our recovery point, right? Our RPO. And the RTO is like when we back up in case like the house burns down.
Yeah, but like it's whenever Rich gets new hardware and we get time to bring it all down over the WAN. And that could be hours, days, weeks, but we're not beholden. Whereas if you're in a large organization, you'll probably have something along the lines of like 4 hours or something. Keep in mind, the more those numbers approach zero, the exponential your budget needs to be. To put it in perspective, Amazon's mission critical stuff, and I'll have to go check this again, is 0 for recovery point, but their RTO is like 2 hours.
Okay.
That's like mission critical, can't go down. You're paying lots of money. And then their next one is, I think, 4 hours and like 24 hours is their next level.
Wow, it's that big of a jump?
It's a huge jump. It's massive.
And probably a huge jump in money too.
Yeah, and like, where you want to store it, right? Because, when you're Amazon, you want to keep all those things up forever. That's going to cost money because they're going to, have global region pairs, and they're going to have, multiple backups, and they're going to have multiple WAN connections, and all that stuff is you're paying for, especially when you're doing cloud stuff.
Redundancy for redundancy, right?
And then finally, we have the biggest one, which I think is something that also lots of people miss, is you need to test it and then optimize it.
You see the smile? The smile is one of those things.
When was the last time we did a test?
I don't know if we. Now we're gonna look real bad. We're talking about backup. I think we did a test initially on when we were looking at making sure that to validate it worked.
That's true, yeah.
And then from that point, we haven't had a test because we're not actually practicing what we're preaching.
Super, yeah, but it's one of those things, especially when you do enterprise, that you need to test. There's a story, I think it was from like 2011. The oil rig server failed, and they had all backups, but they had not checked the backups in over 2 or 3 years, and they were all corrupted.
Oof. Yeah, that's the worst thing.
And they were out and just had to rebuild that data.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what happens. Like, a lot of people set and forget, because again, I think that part of that though comes down to, an organization doesn't have enough bodies, and they're like, you're the backup admin now, so get in there. So you set it up and you're like, boop, and it works, and you might test it initially. You're like, this is good. And then all the other parts of life get in the way.
Yeah.
And so I guess the moral of this story is, if you are a backup admin and you are not regularly having to restore data for users where you discovered that there's a problem, you should, matter of fact, if you're watching this right now, press pause and just restore a file. Just do it.
Pick one.
Pick a small one. Could be a text file. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure you can read that file and the data's there, because that is what happens. That's like the worst case scenarios. You've had a situation go down where it's like the business or the people you serve, whether it's your family or your company, they have an expectation, and it's just like,
it should be there.
It should be there. Like, I need to restore these files. I need this thing, like family photos, or like the company's budgetary stuff, or whatever. And if you're like, that's a bad deal. So,
and there's also things you have to think about, because up until, at least it feels recently that we've talked about it more, but I don't know if older systems really accounted for bit rot as much as things do now. Whereas like ZFS and Btrfs and all those type of file systems, and your Veeams and your Commvaults and all that will do what's called data scrubbing, and they'll make sure that all those bits are touched so they move a little bit, and they don't get if they're error corrected for cosmic rays or whatever magic data degradation happens over time. It's good to have those things, because if you don't touch your backups, they'll eventually go corrupted.
Right. Yeah. Especially, and I'm thankful that I don't live in this world anymore, but like tape backup stuff, like, the old school way, guys, it used to be that hard drives were expensive, and they're still expensive, don't get me wrong, especially big sized volume drives. But it used to be that hard disks were so expensive that you used tape media as like the last, that was your DR or your offsite, was your one out of the 3-2-1. Your one was put it on tape, send that tape someplace else, or put it in a safe that's fireproof, something. Just get it away from the regular things that you could then restore it. And a lot of companies would archive on top of that, where they would do their backups and they would recycle their tapes as they, as old tapes would, the backup software would say, send me back this tape, and you put it in and overwrite it. But an archive is supposed to be permanent. People would be using tape for permanence, and they would send it away, and then come back and be like, oh, yeah, there's something happened to this tape in between being produced in your tape drive and being shipped off someplace for safe storage, and then there's no more archive. So.
And I wonder at some level, like, are we losing, when we talked about 3-2-1, are we losing the 2 part of it? 2 different medias? Because like, technically, I don't know lots of places that actually run 2 different medias actively. Like, they haven't, some people have legacy tape systems, or, because tape,
autoloaders and stuff
tape
like that.
is really cheap at a, like, I'll insert the drive manually level, and then I get 30 terabytes of storage or something.
Right.
At the enterprise level, it's these giant multi-million-dollar tape machines that have little robot arms that grab them and pick them up and move them.
Autoloaders that pull a tape and drop it.
And like, God forbid you have like worm backups or something where you're only allowed to write once to the disk.
But that's for true archive stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But just kind of wondering how long that lives, because I know lots of people will ship their stuff off site, but maybe they don't have it on separate media. So I wonder if the methodology is outdated, or if the world changed.
I as far as I understand, 321 is still very much considered the de facto means of doing proper backups. But yeah, I could even talk about the current company that I work right now. We don't do that. Like we back up, we store on local disks, and then we offload to cloud storage. And that's
would you consider cloud a separate media at that point?
It is. No, it's separate media because
it's object storage, but that's just kind of a different file system OS on top. I don't care what Microsoft.
Yeah, we don't care what the underlying disks are. Right? You just have to. If you're using cloud storage, you are explicitly accepting the risk and assuming that Microsoft or Google or AWS, whoever your actual storage target is for your data, is somehow maintaining it so that it stays reliable.
Yeah.
And I believe that they probably are, because they just have the resources for it, right? They just throw so many disks at things and they replicate data all the time between disks as disks fail.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think that for a lot of people, you'll find that there's only a straight to disk, and then from disk to cloud or something for DR. But continue on with where you're at. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. And so I guess when we just talked about backups again and methodology for that, what else can we do with DR? And if you have lots of money, you may have a cold site.
Yeah.
Do you have a cold site anywhere?
No, we do not.
No. Okay.
No. That's the sort of money that no business that I guess the last business I worked for actually technically had a cold site. It was still in the same campus and same facility. It was just like next door, so to speak, but it was technically cold.
Yeah. And so if a cold site for a definitions case is a site that is basically getting like daily replications or hourly replications, but no data's changing off of it. There's no one connecting to it really. It's just things are getting deployed there. Lots of people will have cold sites that's actually just hardware. Yeah. And they'll just boot off a backup and restore the whole thing there over time. Mm-hmm. But then if you can't afford the downtime of a cold site, because a cold site could be anywhere from like a couple of hours to a couple of days for a full restore for the cold site to become hot, you have an active hot site. And an active hot site is when your data is basically streaming there asynchronously, and you're getting, every 15 minutes, every hour, whatever you decide, your RPO and RTOs are, those are going directly there. And when a DR event happens, and this is the big difference from like a backup is happening, nightly and people are restoring. Mm-hmm. A DR event has to be called. Someone has to say, hey, earthquake happened in California. I need to fail over to my Florida data center. And then someone says that, and you cross your fingers really tightly, and you pray that all the automation you've worked on will actually fail over, and your IPs will kick over, and all your VMs will come up, and you'll be able to survive and fix that the primary site until
if
everything's ready.
Yeah, like I struggle a little bit with the whole like true DR flip a switch, because a lot of disaster recovery assumes that you are a certain level of business that will continue to operate after a major disaster. And a lot of companies that I have worked for, even if there was a major disaster, they won't continue to operate. They will work on recovering.
Yeah.
But you can expect that if your campus, if your headquarters is in an earthquake zone and there's an earthquake and some of your buildings get flattened, your business is down. Right. So I mean the DR part of it is I think is definitely more beneficial if you are serving customers and they're global and you are global and you are maybe more cloud-based. But I think that DR, in a realistic perspective, has a limitation in that the decision has to be made based on how big the company is, right?
Yeah, and I think the closer you run to zero, the higher your costs go. Also, the larger disaster you want to plan for. Because like I've seen lots of DR when I was researching this that was like, for a meteor strike or for a volcano. And I'm like,
super volcano.
Yeah, I'm like, if Yellowstone goes off, no one's worrying about their DR strategy. No. I'm sorry. Like
shoveling ash off the roofs of our houses. Yeah. That's a good point. I think that what's more beneficial, did you look at immutability in backups at
that,
all?
That was something they talked about, especially when it came to cyber attacks. And ransomware and all that.
I feel like that's the new future when it comes to maybe not necessarily disaster recovery. If you have an offsite place to store stuff in the cloud, check the box for disaster recovery. But immutability is really like, that's the big thing that shows up in a lot of cybersecurity insurance stuff that companies have to deal with. Like, do you have immutable backups? Do you want? I don't know if you have anything to talk about that.
I mean, I know a little bit about it, and talking about it. I don't have anything specific on it for the immutability part, but I know it's a big thing to like not only know that your thing has immutable, but to track it if it were changed.
Right. Well,
and this is actually one of the things that snapshots help you with. If someone goes and ransoms all your ES6i data stores, well, you just roll the snapshot back. Yeah. Hopefully they haven't gotten to your, storage appliance. And there's a whole another podcast about exfilling people out of your environment. Oof. Rich might be more able to talk on that one while I sit and listen.
Yeah.
But it's those type of things that are also really big, because like just having 2 days of snapshots can save you. Mm-hmm. And if you can afford the storage for more, you should have more.
Do it.
To help with that immutability thing. But immutability also kind of feels like this gray area, because like there's immutability where like I'm watching the checksum so that I know the file never changed, or I'm making worm backups and nothing's ever changing.
That's true. Yeah. So worm, by the way, we said a few times, worm means write once, read many. So basically it's a read. As soon as you write data to it, it's read only after that point. And that is what immutability is. Fundamentally speaking, immutability, an immutable backup is essentially you write to this in parallel to your writing of your active backups. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. That immutability means you kind of expect that you're going to have an additional set of storage that is identically sized because you're keeping that stuff. And where it really comes into play is ransomware guys and the guys who are getting into networks and they are encrypting things have gotten really, really good at getting in and not just ransomwaring and encrypting your active systems like your Windows servers and whatnot, but down to the virtualization levels as well. And once they get in there, they're at the level where they can actually encrypt the data stores and the data on your virtualization, you're done. Mm. It doesn't matter if you have snaps or what, the whole thing is going to be encrypted. It's going to be a lead brick. So immutable backups are the things that, like, I know from like currently working through a project on that with at my current company, which is cybersecurity insurance, which is the thing that a lot of companies use in case bad guys come and they wreck your day. You can call up the cybersecurity insurance and they'll help you recover and they'll give you some monies, right? Because your business you pay a lot of money for it. It's insurance, guys. But they expect that if you have backups of something, that you also have an immutable backup where you can just restore from that. And then that's a read-only process and you can restore everything and boof, you're off and it's nice. So, but you're not going to get that in a home system. I mean, like before I worked at this current company, no one ever talked about immutable backups, but then ransomware has just become the thing. Like, so if you're working for a business and your IT job is like maintain servers and virtualization infrastructure, if you're an IT infrastructure admin or a system administrator, whatever your role is, and you have to deal with backups, know that immutability is coming for you if you're not already familiar with it. It's going to be a thing you're going to have to do.
Yeah, somehow to get there. And when we're talking home lab levels, especially if you run ES6i like Rich and I do, there's an integration inside of Scale to have them snapshot your data stores for you.
Yeah,
that's highly worth doing.
Yeah. Assuming you've got all the space.
Assuming you got some space, yeah. I mean, I don't know how large your data stores are, but if you got a couple terabytes, it's worth at least taking one snapshot to know what you need. But it's those things like can bail you out when you need them. Mm-hmm. You don't think about them much, but if you keep testing them and then they finally work when you need them, they'll save your life and maybe your job.
And you'll get a sweet bonus for being the guy who saved the day. And like the snapshots that happen inside of just to be clear, because we use that term a lot and we're talking about virtualization as well. I want to differentiate between the snapshots that are happening in a storage appliance and the snapshots that you do inside of your hypervisor. The snapshots that happen inside of a hypervisor are really intended to be like, I want to install some updates. I'm going to snap the OS, make the changes, and if it blows up, I can just roll back and including roll back to an active state if you want to. Snapshots that are in a storage appliance are more longer term.
Yeah, you're keeping them for weeks. at a time.
Again, assuming you've got the additional storage space, but they're different. Like snapshots and virtualization, if you leave them there, you're going to have a bad time. You're going to find out someday. You're going to get a phone call and be like, "What do you mean I'm out of storage space on my my SAN?"
Contrary to popular usage, snapshots are only supposed to be around for 48 hours.
I believe
maybe a week.
Yeah,
VMware recommends 48 hours. They should be out of there within 48 hours. Yeah. So set up an Ansible playbook, set up a PowerShell.
Yeah, but it's not that easy though.
I think it is. I think
from a programmatic perspective, it's easy. But like, there's a lot of people who don't know if a Windows update is going to affect something for maybe a week, right?
Just set it for 90 days.
Sure.
Have it cleared out.
No, you should have something.
Something needs to go around and clear out that extra space, and you'll just be like, oh, I didn't know I had 4 or 5 terabytes of snapshots lying around.
Yeah, I remember as an aside, like you and I worked at a certain company together, and there was a snapshot done on a mail server. And this was an important mail server. This was a very important mail server. It ran the whole organization in the headquarters. And there's a snap done because there's an update done on it. And then there was a forget to restore that snap, or to not restore, excuse me, but
it works. So yeah.
And it ran, and it consumed 100% of the data store that virtual machine was on, which then caused that VM to crash. And all the other VMs that might be housed on that same thing. And it's like, you make that mistake once. You only make that mistake once. And then after that, you look at it like a hawk. And then that gives you like ammo to go after somebody like, excuse me, but you made a snap like 4 weeks ago, and it's now larger than the initial disk. Oh, you're like, it's bad. So
yeah. And the big thing when we talked about ZFS replication is you can actually have it take snapshots and send them to me.
Yeah, that's what we do now, right?
That's how the ZFS replication. I don't think we really explained that earlier.
Yeah.
But what happens is we use the Nextcloud file share. It gets a snapshot. I get the initial one, which is 20 terabytes, 5 terabytes, whatever it is this week. And then from now on, I get the changes when they're done.
Right.
And that's really important. And that kind of leads into what we're talking. If you're shipping your stuff elsewhere, you might want to look at backup as a service. And shipping it up to Glacier, or what is it? Is it Cold Store? What does Azure call their fancy cold blobs?
They've got hot, warm, and then cold. And so cold storage is basically in Azure terms for like long-term storage. I don't think actually Azure really wants you to use that for cold, because for your DR stuff necessarily, because you might be pulling from it or regularly writing to it. Cold and by the way, I'm sure there's a lot of people who have different opinions on this, and I encourage you to like make mention of what your opinions on it. But cold storage is for stuff that you want to just keep forever, but it's basically like archive level. Yeah. Put it in cold, and then you're not going to access it. And then, maybe 20 years down the road, there's a litigation case, something where you have to, for whatever reason, right? Hopefully you don't keep your data that long, and you restore out of that. But the problem with cold is it's super cheap to store stuff in there. That doesn't sound like a problem, but it is a problem, because moving data into it is cheap. Pulling data out is extremely expensive. Like it makes me feel like there's somebody in Microsoft data centers that's like panic running down a hallway with a cart of hard drives, just like, I got to get to this database, and shove these disks in, because you can't pull cold immediately. Like it has to spin up disks someplace in Antarctica. I'm being sarcastic, and then pull that data down, and it's extremely expensive to use that, because you pull and all that, you pay for an exfil data rate and all that kind of stuff. So
all your egress charges, but
egress, that's it.
But hey, if you need a quick backup solution and you can afford it, it can save you in the event like you can't afford a secondary site. It's one of those things that I think is definitely worth it. I use storage too. Storage is it's not cold. It's more of a, what is it? Blockchain warm.
Yeah,
it's not quite. Storage is a well, you want to describe storage?
Sure. Storage is a Web3 based global cloud storage system. That's what it is. So, I think we made a video back, because I run storage as a node operator, which means I hold Brandon's data. The irony, which means I might actually be holding some of my data via Brandon. But anyway, basically what it does is you feed it a file, it breaks into a bunch of shards, sends those shards all over the world, and keeps track of them. And so no single storage operator holds enough of your data to do anything with it. Plus, it's all encrypted in an individual shard level. And the benefit of that is that you can read and write from it, but you pay for that, right? So
but that's technically hot, right? We'd say that like I can instantly pull anything down. And I think right now I'm on the free tier, so I only get like 150 gigs or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But that's not a good. That is a fun way to back it up, to try how to back it up, but I wouldn't use it for anything large because of the cost of it.
They claim to be faster than hot AWS.
Really?
Because it's globally distributed, and assuming you have enough node operators around you, you're grabbing tiny bits, it's supposed to be faster.
I guess that's fair, because what are we, 2 or 3 hops away from each other on the internets or something?
Yeah,
maybe one.
Just one. We're at least 1 or 2.
I know we're on the same ISP, so we can't be too far.
Right. We probably hit the same, distributing router and then into the network from there. But
that's kind of wild. I didn't think about that. But that's an example of cloud backup. You can also push your stuff to Glacier. Glacier is really cheap.
Yeah.
Again, cheap in, expensive out.
Yeah.
But if you have personal, the biggest use for me is keeping Nextcloud backed up, because I have files I need and can't lose.
Yeah.
That's the use for that. Is it goes up there and I get a bill for 20 cents or whatever, and hope I don't have to pay the quadruple exfil rate or whatever. But
rate. The funny thing is, because we didn't mention this, as the YouTube channel is as a business, we use GCP, right? We use all the Google Suite, G Suite stuff, right? I back up our data from the cloud onto premise with Synology Active Backup.
Yes, that's the other thing. We could do a whole thing about Synology too, because they have what is it? O365 now, not it? Is it M or is it O?
It's
whatever.
It's Microsoft 365.
M365, because Microsoft has to change their names every 5 weeks. We can't have the same one, but you can actually bring your cloud stuff down, and that's really powerful to an organization. When you don't want to pay for cloud-to-cloud backups or things along those lines. You can also do hyper backup, which is when you take an entire Synology and you ship it to another Synology.
Sure.
But those are proprietary technologies on that.
Sure. It'd be funny if they're just rsync one behind the scenes, but I would hope not. But and the company I work for right now actually uses Veeam to do the same sort of thing with Microsoft 365. They back up all of the OneDrive data and everything that the company uses, including Outlook mailboxes. They're all also backed up locally, just in case Microsoft disappears, or I'm kidding, but or something happens, right? You need that data to be protected.
And that's a good point, because Microsoft guarantees you availability, but they do not take care. And if you read your terms of services, which I'm 100% sure you read, you're actually in charge of your backups, and you have to figure out how to back them up. Microsoft will make sure they're there in their active state, but do not provide backups for them.
Yeah,
allegedly. Which makes sense, right? They can only keep so much data,
right? Or you could pay them, and they'd be happy to store it, right?
Yeah,
and then you're funding Microsoft's backup infrastructure. But so
you got anything else you want to roll through?
No, I think that probably covers it. I just good talk, dude.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
It's been a minute, right?
Yeah, and again, we barely touched the tip of the iceberg on this and how deep you want to go into it, and multi-site backups and global pairs and all sorts of other higher level cloud stuff that Rich and I don't deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, we don't work for organizations that are large enough to necessarily need that. And I don't honestly know at what point you really start looking at storing data in another data center on another continent. What is your disaster recovery situation where you need that? And if you need that, you probably have the budget. Knock on wood, you have the budget for that, because that's crazy. But
and I mean, we've dealt with global subsidiaries. Those underwater and intercontinental internet lines aren't the best.
Yeah,
some days. So
yeah, that's true. So all right, so everybody, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments what you thought about this. If you want to hear more about something specifically, or maybe a different topic, we'd love to hear from you. Brandon wants me to tell you that you should get some swag.
We don't have hats, though. I'm a little upset.
Actually, let me ask you this. You guys, if you're watching or listening, do you want hats? Because we wear the hats all the time. If you like the hats, we can get the hats. We got shirts I'm not wearing now. But yeah, so Brandon, thank you.
Yeah, and tell us what's in your home lab. How do you back it up?
Yeah, we'd love to know what you do.
Are you an old school Linux admin and you just tar file that to
backup D, baby? There's just sending it over there
to a different thing. And shout out to our YouTube subscribers now. We got rid of our Patreon subscribers, so we got YouTube subscribers.
They're called members.
Members? I'm sorry. Apologies.
Yeah, we got to get the vernacular right to differentiate.
And if you want to tell Rich and I how wrong we are about this and how we know nothing, get in the comments.